Girl spots hook on her hotel room door. What she does next saves her life. What started as a relaxing vacation turned terrifying the moment Josie saw the wire hook creeping in her hotel room, forcing her to think fast and act even faster. Josie Bowers was the kind of girl who noticed the little things, even if she didn't always trust her gut about them. At just 19, she had a knack for spotting the way sunlight sliced through a crack in the curtains or how a faint smell of lavender hung in the air after her mother spritzed perfume. Her friends called her a daydreamer, but Josie thought of herself as more of an observer. She loved to travel, not just for the scenery, but for the chance to soak in all the details. New sounds, unfamiliar accents, the texture of sand on a foreign shore. This summer trip to the U.S. was supposed to be the highlight of her year. Warm beaches, long evenings by the water, and the soothing hum of waves outside her window. Josie's stepdad, Darren, was a practical man. He was the type to prepare for every possibility, and he'd made it his mission to pass along his sense of caution to his stepdaughter. "It's not about being scared," he'd say. "It's about being aware." Whenever Josie packed for a trip, Darren was there, rattling off his usual checklist of reminders. Keep your wallet close. Don't carry all your cash in one place. And most importantly, always trust your instincts. Josie would roll her eyes and tease him about being overprotective, but deep down, she appreciated his concern. Darren's words always stayed with her, quietly echoing in the back of her mind. The hotel they chose looked picture-perfect online. Perched on the edge of a bustling boardwalk, it promised luxurious rooms and easy access to the beach. But when Josie and her family arrived, something felt off. The lobby was grand but oddly quiet. The long, marble-floored hallways seemed too empty, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Even the friendly bellhop seemed distracted, his smile faltering when their eyes met. Josie couldn't quite put her finger on it, but the atmosphere gave her pause. She brushed it off, telling herself she was just tired from the journey. After all, what could really go wrong in a well-reviewed seaside hotel? It was the second day of their stay when Josie decided to freshen up before dinner. Her family had gone down to the beach for a late afternoon walk, but Josie wasn't feeling up to it. She told them she'd meet them later and took the elevator back to the room. The ride up was smooth and uneventful until she noticed the faint reflection of movement in the elevator doors. She turned quickly, but there was nothing there. It was probably just a trick of the light. Still, a shiver ran down her spine as she stepped out onto the silent corridor. As Josie made her way to the room, she had the odd sensation that she was being watched. The hallway stretched out long and empty in both directions, and the faint buzz of fluorescent lights above her only amplified the eerie stillness. For a moment, she thought she heard soft, deliberate footsteps behind her. But when she turned around, the hall was empty, just as before. The thought crossed her mind that maybe someone had followed her from the lobby, but she dismissed it as paranoia. She reached the door, pulled out her keycard, and slipped inside. The room greeted her with an inviting glow. The late afternoon sun filtered through sheer curtains, painting the walls in warm, golden tones. The soft carpet underfoot and the plush bedding instantly put her at ease. She kicked off her sandals, placed her phone on the nightstand, and headed for the bathroom. The familiar sound of running water and the citrusy scent of the hotel's complimentary toiletries helped her relax. For the first time since arriving, Josie felt truly at peace. But then, just as she turned off the shower, a faint noise caught her attention. It was subtle, like the scrape of metal against wood. She froze, her hand on the towel rack, ears straining to catch the sound again. It came a second time, a barely audible click coming from the direction of the door. Josie's mind raced. It could be housekeeping, she thought. Maybe they forgot something and were trying to get in. She quickly wrapped herself in a towel and stepped out into the room, her pulse beginning to quicken. The door was still closed, but the sound hadn't stopped. It wasn't loud or obvious, just a faint, rhythmic tapping. She stood there, wet hair dripping onto the carpet, every muscle in her body tense. A whisper of unease slid down her spine. She thought of Darren's words, "Trust your instincts." For a brief moment, Josie's logical side tried to reason it away. Surely, It was just a staff member with a key. Or maybe it was nothing at all, just the building settling. But something about the stillness of the room, the empty hallway outside, and that quiet, deliberate noise made her doubt those explanations. She felt it in her gut. Something wasn't right. Josie's hands trembled against the doorknob as the scraping outside stopped abruptly. For a moment, she could only hear her own breath, shallow, uneven, and the muffled hum of the hotel's air conditioning. In the silence, her mind raced back to the countless talks she'd had with Darren, her stepdad. "Josie, it's not about being paranoid. It's about being prepared," he'd say, often with a faint smile that softened his otherwise stern expression. "If you ever find yourself in a situation where you're alone and something feels off, never let them know you're alone. Call out. Make it sound like someone else is there. It might just be enough to make them think twice." At the time, Josie had half listened, more eager to leave the house and start her adventures than absorb another of Darren's safety lectures. But now, those words weren't just advice. They were a lifeline. Call out. Her pulse quickened. The silence outside the door felt loaded, as though the person, whoever it was reevaluating their next move. Josie tightened her grip on the handle, her knuckles turning white. She opened her mouth to yell, but hesitated. What if they didn't believe her? What if shouting only made them more determined? The fear pressed down on her, heavy and suffocating, but Darren's voice, steady and reassuring, echoed in her mind. Never let them know you're alone. She had to sound confident, unshaken. Taking in a deep, steadying breath, she forced the words out in a strong, clear voice. "Dad, someone's at the door." For a split second, everything went quiet. Then she heard it, a shuffle of movement, quick and deliberate. The hook was yanked back, the faint sound of it scraping against the floor. Whoever was out there didn't linger. Josie caught the soft tread of retreating footsteps, each step growing quieter until the hallway was silent again. Her heart pounded, each beat a reminder that she was still standing, still breathing, still safe. She let go of the doorknob, fingers stiff from how tightly she'd held it. The overwhelming stillness inside the room felt like a vacuum. Slowly, she sank down onto the edge of the bed, pressing her palms to her knees to stop them from shaking. A strange mixture of relief and exhaustion washed over her. She was safe for now. Darren's advice had worked. But the weight of what just happened, and what could have happened, lingered heavily. The adrenaline that had kept her alert and focused began to fade, leaving her feeling drained. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand and, with trembling hands, dialed her family. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "Can you come back? Right now? Please." The urgency in her tone was enough. They didn't question her. They said they'd be there as soon as they could. When her parents finally arrived, she told them everything. Every sound, every thought that had raced through her mind, every ounce of fear, and every split-second decision. She left nothing out. Her mother's face turned pale as she listened, her stepdad nodding grimly as though he'd seen this all before. "Well done, Josie," Darren said quietly after she'd finished recounting the events. "You kept calm, you thought quickly, and you acted. That's what matters." His words were reassuring, but they didn't erase the memory of the hook, the scraping, or the breathing on the other side of the door. Josie knew she'd be hearing those sounds in her mind for a long time. Josie's family was still trying to process what had happened. Her mother couldn't stop pacing the room, glancing nervously at the door as if it might swing open at any moment. Darren, usually so composed, had a tightness around his mouth that Josie had never seen before. He stayed close to her side, his hand resting reassuringly on her shoulder. Despite his calm demeanor, she could tell he was running every scenario through his head, mentally reviewing everything he'd taught her and wondering what more he could have done. They reported the incident to the hotel staff, who immediately took action. The manager apologized profusely, promising to review security footage and tighten their protocols. Josie's family accompanied the manager to the security room, where they watched hours of grainy footage, trying to pinpoint the moment someone approached their door. But the camera angle was just off, catching glimpses of movement in the hallway, shadows that never resolved into clear faces. Whoever had been outside Josie's room seemed to know exactly how to avoid being caught on tape. It left everyone on edge. The lack of evidence felt like a ghostly void, a reminder that danger could be close and yet completely unseen. For Josie, the experience didn't end when they left the hotel. She found herself replaying the moment over and over, thinking about what she could have done differently. She thought about how her stepdad's advice had been her saving grace. Without that voice in the back of her mind, she might have frozen completely, or worse, opened the door out of confusion. She knew her quick thinking had made the difference, but the realization also gave her a newfound respect for preparation. It wasn't just a lecture anymore, it was survival. In the days following, Josie decided to share her story online. She was hesitant at first, unsure how people might react, but something pushed her to speak up. If her experience could help just one other person, it would be worth it. She wrote out the events in detail, being careful to stick to the facts while also emphasizing what she had learned. Her stepdad's advice became a central theme. If you ever feel unsafe, don't let them know you're alone. Make them think you have someone there. The response was overwhelming. People flooded her post with comments, many sharing their own close calls or thanking her for the reminder to stay vigilant. Some said they had never even considered the possibility of someone using a hook to enter a locked room. Others admitted that they often stayed in hotels without double-checking the locks or taking the time to think about what they'd do in an emergency. Josie's story became a touchstone for these conversations, a real-life example of how a little preparation and quick thinking could prevent a nightmare scenario. Beyond the likes and shares, what stood out most to Josie was how her story changed the way people thought about personal safety. Friends and strangers alike told her they had started implementing simple precautions, checking the locks twice, placing something in front of the door at night, keeping a phone within arm's reach. Some even mentioned teaching their children what to do if they ever felt unsafe while traveling. The impact was more than she could have hoped for. What had started as a terrifying encounter had turned into a way to help others. For Josie, the biggest takeaway was the importance of remaining calm under pressure. Fear was inevitable, but giving in to panic could lead to dangerous mistakes. Instead, her stepdad's guidance reminded her to pause, think, and then act. That brief moment of clarity allowed her to make a calculated decision, and that decision had made all the difference. In hindsight, she saw how crucial it was to anticipate the what-ifs before they happened. It wasn't about living in fear. It was about being ready for the unexpected. As her story spread, people began to ask Josie what advice she would give to anyone traveling alone. Her answer was always the same: trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Have a plan. Know what you'll do if someone tries to get into your room, and make sure you can execute it quickly. Create the illusion of strength. If someone thinks you're not alone, they're less likely to take the risk of breaking in. Keep key items accessible. Your phone, a flashlight, or even a noise-making device should be within reach, so you can act immediately if needed. These lessons weren't just theoretical anymore. They were grounded in her experience. Josie's story wasn't just a cautionary tale. It was a reminder that the ability to think fast, stay calm, and rely on a bit of wisdom could mean the difference between safety and danger. And that's the message she hoped everyone would take to heart.